Hello there, this is Debbie Heiser, and I am so stinking excited to share this new season 4 with you. And I can't believe that this is already the 4th season of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. And I just want to thank each of you who listen. And my hope is that the tools, the thoughts and experiences I share, as well as the work I've done to love myself, love others, and love the work I'm called to do, that also helps me lead a truly lit up life, will help you move into a more lit up life yourself. A few things to look for in this season. Super excited to share that we're going to be coming to you now every week with episodes jam-packed with information to serve you. Every other week, you'll hear from a guest who's leading a life that they love, and I'll be asking them to share their stories, how they got there, and any thoughts or advice that they can give you, our loyal listeners. We have new music too, and I'm so thrilled to introduce this song called Ride, sung and co-written by my friend, Miss Jackie Wilson. And she, along with her collaborators, Tyler Banks, David DJ Lee, and Chris Renee, are super talented and generous, as this song fits perfectly into the thought of stepping into your best life. To follow any or all of these talented folks, check out the show notes for their social handles. Thanks again for listening. Enjoy season 4 and do us a solid and leave us a rating and a comment to help us be able to share more with people across the globe. Now, let's get started with this episode.
You're the only one who really can transform your mind.
Hello, and welcome back to this episode of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. I'm going to talk about masks today. And I know some of you, if you've been listeners for a while, may have heard me talk a little bit about masks and what kind of masks I've had on in my past. And it was interesting. I was just on a call with a good friend of mine, Katrina Doran, who she's been on the podcast. She's a mosaic artist. And we were talking about, she has done some photo shoots where she dresses in these, not costumes, but somewhat costumes. And she kind of takes on the persona of that costume in a photo shoot, and how she feels so much more comfortable doing that than she does when she is stepping in as herself. We were talking about photo shoots and how sometimes it's uncomfortable being on the other side of the camera and being the one that is being focused on in the camera. And so I really wanted to talk about this whole idea of being authentic. And what does it mean to be authentic? And here's the deal. Like, I feel like I'm a really honest person, and I try to be honest, but sometimes we don't realize the dishonesty. We feel like we think we're being honest, but we're only being as honest as what we can handle at the time. And so when you think about it, being authentic is really about uncovering and figuring out who you are as a person. What are your values? Like, I value honesty. I value authenticity, which is kind of twofold. I value like characteristics in a person that they're able to play without judgment, but then also know when it's appropriate to adults. And really, when I say appropriate, that's my kind of a judgment, but like can flow into that very easily. And so when I think about authenticity, I think about the fact that the stories of who I was as I grew up, and my parents did, they were fabulous parents. And I'm sorry, but all of us parents, we do things to mess up our kids, unbeknownst to us, not consciously by any way, shape, or form. But there's just things that we do and don't even realize the impact. And so for a long time, I had this persona that I was the good girl, right? And I went to youth group, and I taught piano lessons in high school and did all of those things, but I was hiding. And, in some ways I was really lonely. I had friends in a lot of different, back then we had the cliques, right? The jocks and the artsy people and the music people and all these types of things that we called each other, these labels that I know are still out there. And what was interesting about it is I found myself being able to flow in and out of any of those groups. And I don't know if part of that was just because I had moved so much when I was growing up from 6th grade until my freshman year in high school. We moved to Denver and then to Chicago and then to Kansas City. And kind of how I then was able to almost become a little bit of a chameleon, right? Like put these masks on. And I remember my dad always calling me Dear Debbie, kind of like Dear Abby, and how people would come and talk to me about their problems. And part of that is I was a good listener, but also I was a big rescuer and didn't realize how much I rescued people, both in a work setting as a leader and as a friend, and as just someone that people knew. And for me, that had a certain authenticity around it that I could very easily see gaps and I could fix those gaps. And that served me well in the work environment. But what I uncovered was that I don't like to always see the gaps. I do see them, but then it's my job, particularly as a coach now, to not fix it for my clients, but to ask a good question. And then if that good question doesn't lead to the dialogue where they figure it out themselves and they find that teacher within, then it's about asking a better question and continuing to ask more questions to get people to self-realize where they might be stopping themselves or where they're not necessarily in congruency with what they feel and know to be themselves and what they're displaying to the world. That's one of the things. Social media. I remember getting a message from someone I went to high school that frankly was a little rude. And they were like, there's no way you can be this happy about life. And, I responded to him and I said, I'm sorry if you're not this happy, but I am this happy. It doesn't mean that I don't have crap going on. It doesn't mean that I was in a marriage that was falling apart. It doesn't mean that I wasn't finding my way in a new job. And here I was the expert at Citibank, and then move into a role that I didn't know what QuickBooks was. I didn't even know how to use it. And so there's those things, but the point being is like what I portrayed to the world, it wasn't that it wasn't authentic. It was, I'm a happy person. I tend to be one of those people that look forward and say, okay, this happened, but how can I move forward from this? And I'm learning to feel the feels as they happen. And really not sit in that for very long, but allow the feelings to come and be okay with that. And I don't stuff those anymore, but it's really then about displaying who you are. And that's what I've been trying to do in my social media and on these podcasts is I'm not perfect, nor do I claim to be, and nor do I want to be, because in the pause, in the avenues of self-reflection, that's where the transformation happens. That's where change occurs and innovation and creativity. And so for years, I thought I was being honest with myself. And, then going into my marriage, and that's just a good example for me to use. And again, I say this every time I bring Brent into the conversation. He's a great man. And we had a really good marriage until it wasn't. And for both of us that happened, but I was being as honest as I could be at the time. And sometimes we go into survival mode. Like I got to the point where I didn't feel much, I would go to a movie with friends. And I think I mentioned this on another podcast, The Notebook. I went with all my girlfriends and they're all bawling at the end of the movie. And I'm like, it's a movie. Right. Because I hadn't opened my heart up. Now, at the end, my friend Dawn was sobbing and saying, John would do this for me. And I lost it. But I find now that my heart, I can tap into it a little bit more. And, I might watch something that brings tears to my eyes, or a memory comes and it brings tears to my eyes. But ultimately, when I was in that marriage, I didn't feel like I could share my feelings. And, Brent and I went through a lot, and he had his demons, I had mine. And I just didn't, it wasn't him, but I didn't feel safe sharing my feelings, because every time I had shared it in the past, it wasn't okay for me to feel things and to show those feelings. And, again, my dad's fantastic too, but I don't remember seeing him cry, until my mom died. And so I grew up thinking, oh, you don't show emotion, right? And so I realized that that's really not in congruency with who I am, because I want to integrate my head and my heart and my soul and who I am to be able to show up in the world. And so I realized in 2018, I went to a conference. Excuse me, my throat's a little scratchy today. I went to a summit with my business coach, Amira Alvarez. And she asked me, what do you want? And it was interesting because I had watched other women come to the mic and go through this chaos energy of kind of, well, blah, 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 blah. And she would say, time out. What do you want? And once I dropped into what is it that I wanted, I realized very quickly that what I wanted was to step from behind the masks, that I felt like sometimes I had just a small mask on or like a little masquerade mask. And other times I had full body armor on. And I would connect with people only so far. And even when I was a youth pastor, like I would connect with, at the time they were kids, now they're grown adults. And I feel like I have multiple children, but I would keep them at a distance. And I always didn't necessarily love that. Part of that was also moving so much that I came to this realization of why bother. But then when the emotions got tough, like when my grandmother was passing away and, through it with my mother, it was the first time with my mother, as she was the first one, that I really experienced this, like sitting in the sadness. And so then when Amira asked me, what do you want? And I said, I want to step out from behind the mask. I realized it's layers. And I had to layer back and really go back to what were my values? Like, what is it that I value in myself? And what is it that I value in relationship to other people? Not in comparison, but what do I value in those people? Like I value loyalty. I value knowing that people have my back. I value honesty, even when I don't want to hear it, because to me, that's a true friend. I've always said I'd never want to go shopping with a friend that lets me walk out of a store with a pair of jeans that look like crap on, right? I'd much rather they say, don't buy those. It's not becoming. Go look at this one. And so like that level of honesty, and honestly too, I love going deep in conversation. So for me too, I value that ability to not stay at the surface. And I'm fine. I love to talk about entertainment and music and all of those things, but I love to dig deep into the psyche and talk about why people are thinking one way and what's happening. And, the research geek in me would love to research this and go into those types of conversations. So I value that ability for people to dig in and really just kind of investigate and weed through some of the things in their own lives and allow me to do the same. So part of how I went about, excuse me, stepping from outside the mask is, earlier in the previous podcast, I talked about stepping into fear. That was one way. But then I started asking myself some questions. I started looking at, what do I complain about? Way back 3 or 4 years ago, I realized I would always see the negative in something. So, this is so awesome, except this one little thing. And I stepped back and I thought, what's that about? I never did really figure out what it's about, other than I hear my dad actually say that a lot. And so I stepped back from that and I made the conscious choice to break that cycle of my thinking, so that when I went to go say, this is the perfect day, except this one little thing, I tried to step back from that and say, what am I complaining about? And what's the reason behind that? And then I would ask myself, what am I frustrated by? And as I started to dig through like what I was frustrated about. So let's back up. Let's think about like physical health. What I would complain about a few years ago was that I was tired, I was worn out, I was burned out, overwhelmed. And that was the complaint. I was frustrated because I knew the age that I was, some of the chemical things that were happening in my body and hormonal things caused me, because I go 200 miles an hour, and it caused me by a Saturday to just be worn out. Now I switched some vitamins. I started taking some vitamins that really helped me with that energy level, but I was frustrated by that, not feeling like it was myself and being able to do what I wanted and needed to do. And then I thought, what do I tolerate? Well, part of it is I tolerate my own behavior in not taking care of myself. And, that was a while back. Now I know I sound a little sick today, and I don't get sick very often. It's been a long time, actually. And, but when I think about what I tolerated back then and how I always felt sick, I always had some kind of pain or ache. And that was actually a mask for hiding the pain that I was feeling internally, is that external pain, or the shoulder pain, or the hips hurting me, or this or that. And I'm a firm believer in Louise Hayes. She has a book, You Can Heal Your Life, and the alchemy of healing. And what she says is similar to what Oprah says about the issues are in your tissues, that we mentally hold on to things and emotionally hold on to things. And so, like, when my lower back is hurting, that usually means I'm worrying about finances. And when my feet hurt, that usually means I'm afraid to move forward into something. And so I do believe that there's a lot of that. And so part of that was also stepping back and saying, what am I tolerating? Like, how do I feel in my body? And then what's that connected to? And really doing some deep dives. And sometimes this work is not easy. And I suggest finding someone to help you through this, because we were all here. My theme song that was given to me was We Get By With a Little Help from Our Friends by Joe Croce. And so, or is it Jim Croce? I don't remember. That's not important, but it's about making sure we're reaching out to other people and connecting and asking for that help. But ask yourself, if you're thinking about your job or your business, what do you complain about? What are you frustrated by in that? And what do you tolerate? And that will turn around then to show you what the change is that you really want. What's the mask you want to step out from behind and change it? And so, when I looked at that and I started to realize the masks that I put on, and I have a really good one that is, I got my shit together, right? Like, I can come across that I have it all together when in fact I don't. And I'm trying more and more to step out from behind that mask. And it's not always easy, because again, it's a survival thing. But what I realized is I had a closet full of masks that I put on and switched around depending on the situation. Some were bigger, some not so much. But I really came to this not so awesome realization that my actions weren't matching my values. And when I realized that, I was able to change it. And so then it became this deep dive into what is it? And I shared some of my values before. And then how does that play out? Like, as an example, if I was upset by something and my ex-husband would ask me, "Are you okay?" I'd say, "Yeah, I'm fine." When in fact, I was seething mad. And it took my best friend to say, "Debbie, that's not in congruency with who you are. You're an extremely honest person and you're lying." That was a big wake-up call. But it's those subtle things that we've been trained through our lives about what to do. And so I would challenge you to think about, what are some of the masks that you hide behind? And then maybe start stepping out from what those masks are. Put your toes in the in the water and see what it feels like. Try it on for size that you might hide behind it. I know my sisters used to laugh at me, and I'm sure I still do this a little bit, because when I'm in my work mode, I have a different voice than when I'm just talking to them on the phone. "Hi, this is Debbie," instead of, "Hey, how are you?" And the whole tone of my voice changes. And so just notice, just be aware. And again, my whole lens of curiosity versus judgment. So think about when you start to hide and the reasoning behind that, so that you can start to step out from behind that and be who you are, be in congruency with who you are and what you want to be. And then as you think about it, and I'm going to plug my women's retreat, May 19th through the 21st, here in Sandpoint, Idaho, go out to my website, www.leadyourlituplife.com, under programs and events, and register today, because we're going to vision as business women and as career women where we want our lives to be in 10 years. We don't have all the answers. We don't have all the steps to get there, nor should we. But having somewhat of a vision gives you a roadmap to go from, and you can start to identify then where you're holding on to these masks that then are getting in your way. So with that, folks, I'm going to leave you for today. And thanks so much for being loyal listeners. If you'd do us a solid and give us a rating and a comment about the podcast, I'd sure greatly appreciate it. And with that, it's a wrap, and we'll talk to you in the next couple of weeks.